Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
From an audience perspective, what's really putting your business at risk online, and how can you fix it before it's too late? That is what Greg from Trend Micro will be diving into on this episode. If you're a business owner who thinks you're too small to be targeted or just not sure what your cybersecurity blind spots are, this conversation is your wake-up call. Tune in and learn how to protect your business from real threats, understand what's coming up next, and get practical advice that you can act on right away. Our guest today is Greg Young, who is a Vice President of Cybersecurity and Corporate Development at Trend Micro, has over 35 years in the field. His career spans from everything from serving as Research VP at Gartner to acting as Chief Information Security Officer for Canada's Federal Department of Communications. He's led global security consulting teams, shaped cybersecurity policy, and even served as a captain in the military, police, and counterintelligence. Greg holds the Governor General's Confederation Medal for his work in smart card security and continues to influence digital safety as a member of several national and international cybersecurity advisory boards, including those for Canada and the government of Barbados. And if his voice sounds oddly familiar, you might have seen him as an extra in 2 episodes of Airwolf back in the day. Greg, welcome. Good to have you on the show. Do you have a favorite quote or saying, sir?
Everybody dies to the Airwolf helicopter.
What's the biggest risk in cybersecurity that most businesses overlook?
We've been hyper-focused on the threat in security, but for most businesses, it's looking in the mirror. So 2 things. One is, what's my attack surface? What are all the things I have? I should manage that and not just take it for granted. The second is, for the older stuff I have hard decisions to make because older stuff is typically more vulnerable. I should knowingly keep or get rid of things that put me at risk.
When you say older stuff, I think, what type of age are we talking about? Are we talking about stuff from the 1960s or something from 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
It's old in terms of, has it been neglected from a security perspective? Stuff like Windows and the Apple, those are tended frequently by the vendors, but ones that even just a few years old are not getting security attention from the vendors, open source components, or particularly things like operational technology or Internet of Things stuff in elevators or HVAC components, things like that. If those haven't been getting security attention, they go stale and smell very quickly from a security perspective.
I was watching a discussion on TV about pipelines and something that happened in the US over the last couple of years where the pipeline got shut down because someone hacked the platform. Is that the type of stuff that we're talking about for major infrastructure?
Absolutely. In fact, I was on a panel with the Canadian Gas Association last week about their critical infrastructure, and everybody in the audience looked very nervous. They should be, because a lot of this operational technology in pipelines, electricity, elevators, stuff that typically isn't high tech but has tech in it, those have gotten smarter quickly, but the companies that make them typically don't come from that culture of software where they're aware of the threat and how to prevent vulnerabilities. So this operational technology stuff, for example, in gas refining, very vulnerable for 2 reasons. One is because the companies aren't prepared. 2, it's just become sentient and is still, from a security perspective, an infant.
What has changed? I'm guessing phishing is one of the biggest things. What has changed in cybersecurity in the last 15?
Great question. So phishing remains everywhere, and in over 99% of attacks have an email component in them. And humans, you can't patch them, so there's still the weak spot, and things like AI has made phishing even better, not as easily spottable. So phishing is a constant in almost every attack. But the things that have changed are twofold. One is ransomware is everywhere. And number 2 is the involvement of nations or states in security. They used to be a very rare thing in that time frame you mentioned. Countries wouldn't mess with other countries or get involved in this, but now it's daily.
So if someone is starting a new business and say they're a garage mechanic or a dentist and, they're really good at what they do for a living, but now they bought a computer or they have to handle patient health records or financial records like credit card content. What are the first steps I should start doing? If I need to get tax advice, I go find an accountant. If who do I talk to? What are the credentials that are wrapped around that person so that you know that you're getting the true advice?
That's a tough question about advice. I'd say a starting point for a business is to decide what is in your core competence and what's not. If you are a garage mechanic starting up your business, try to outsource as much as you can. So try to use software as a service, stuff that somebody else has to worry about as much as possible. Do it yourself is great, but even your mechanics don't want you doing it yourself. And there's a reason for that. So try, if you're looking for, booking systems, if you're looking for payment systems, try to go with software as a service or those middlemen who will take care of that for you and insulate you from most of the problems in the management of it. There is an expense there, and if it's too much for your business, then that's the decision. But you can try to make those problems somebody else's problems and leave you to your core business.
How do you keep clients from protecting themselves from themselves?
And that's that mirror, your own attack surface. We can do it ourselves. We'll write our own software, and that's good. Nowadays, security is not an afterthought. It's just incumbent. One of those things changed in that time frame is that it used to be attackers would go after targets intentionally. They would say, I'm going to go after a bank because banks have money. I'm going to go after this company because I don't like them. But now there's none of that. It's just anybody with a computer is a target. Doesn't matter if you're a children's charity or an SPCA, you are a target if you have technology, and they don't care about that. So that is, I think, number one is thinking I won't be a target. And number two is taking shortcuts and expecting not to pay for them.
You talked about the surface. What's the best description of the surface that you speak of?
Yeah, that's a fancy attack surface is a term for my stuff that we tend to get focused on. We tend to focus on desktop PCs and say, okay, that's our technology, but it's really not. Your partners in the supply chain are part of your attack surface. Any of the technology that you use becomes part of your attack surface. Anything that can be messed with is that, including your people. So that's a new way of thinking about it, because we used to get hung up on if it was bought by procurement, therefore it is technology that we own and we have to patch and protect. But there's also this other stuff that people bring in themselves, like bring your own devices. Well, that's part of your attack surface, as is any shadow IT that one of your business units or employees has purchased and brings to work, even if it's not official. We call this attack surface because that's the way the bad guys look at it. They say any way in is a way we can get in. And so we have to consider all of that now.
Something that scares me down to my toes, almost to the point that I don't want to think about it, is I understand my computer getting hacked. But when I hear about my router getting hacked, I don't even know what to do. This whole IoT thing, tell me about how often that happens and how to protect yourself without living in paranoia.
We're in a very shameful period right now. I used to be the analyst who covered the firewall market. And it used to be that, there never used to be big holes in firewalls because that's the stuff that would protect us. And lately we've had a whole bunch of these holes in firewalls show up because the vendors are getting sloppy and not doing what they're supposed to do. The rush to business, because there's so much money in cybersecurity now, some companies have gotten sloppy because there's no excuse for some of this. Same with routers. Vulnerability used to be a really big deal, and now it's almost assumed they're going to be there. So that's the scary part of it. What's the solution? Have layers that assume your router is going to have a problem. Invest in a firewall or in backing up your stuff, and frequently backing it up, not onto your local network. Put it somewhere where it can't be messed with. And you're going to have enough of a backlog of backups that if those start to get messed up and you don't notice it, you're going to have a good one that you can still go back to. It's not all going to be messed with. So I think that's this layered approach, much like air traffic control. They call it the Swiss cheese effect. You can have a bunch of Swiss cheese layers that all have holes in them, but the holes should never line up. And that's what you're going to want to do. Don't just rely on the one sort of thing. You have to assume that things like routers, and unfortunately now even your firewalls, are going to have a hole in it, and that's a high risk, high vulnerability area. So have something behind it.
The more I hear as you're describing this, and I'm thinking about our personal lives, our residential space. It used to be once upon a time, there'd be one computer in the house. The landline would actually be a wired set. Now it's wireless, or you're on your cell. The odds are if a person in the house will have 1 to 2 devices attached to them, whether it's a laptop, tablet, the phone, or even Google or Alexa in the background. What do you do? And especially if you work at home, speaking of your attack surface, now your work opens up your house to, well, that's unfortunate. And now, your kid's doing something and you cross pollute in different directions. How do you manage to keep that kind of coordinated and contained, or can you?
That's one thing that came out of COVID was once companies started to allow more work from home, that they quickly realized two things. One is that homes are a really squishy part of that attack surface. And the second one is that, well, if this trend is going to stay, we have to help employees more. A couple of things. I think that people who work at home are more risky than the businesses, but it can go both ways. Number one is give your people who work at home the security tools they need. The big one is licenses for antivirus or endpoint protections. Give extra ones to your staff for the machines in their home. Have their official laptop that they're going to be switching onto, have to use their kids or the family machine, or, why not help them secure their home? It turns out to be pretty inexpensive to do that. But unfortunately, a lot of companies don't do it. The payoff is great because the bad guys figured this. If I'm going to go after that bank vice president, I'm going to go after his teenagers. I'm going to go after their machines, and then I'm going to pound away at the home network. And I'm going to get that router because I know that's vulnerable. Grab the router, then I see everything. That is the classic kind of lateral movement that attackers will use. Try to do that home survey. If you're the tech support person for your house, go through that incredibly long list of devices that you have and make decisions about saying, do you know what? I have this really old stuff here. We should get rid of that, or maybe try to do something to better protect it.
Like put it in water and to the local store for recycling?
A quick online search could tell you how vulnerable stuff is. So like even my water softener is Wi-Fi enabled now. I don't know why. It gives me information that I'm not going to check that often, but that is now part of my attack surface. And I have checked for, has there been exploits or attacks on that? And I can now say, yep, that's fine. I can go on for a while and not have to worry about that one. But other devices, such as the brand of router I have and that I'm more concerned with, or other devices, especially stuff that is now Windows 10 or earlier, because that is now going out of support. So those are some of the decisions I have to make, saying I've got to start planning about going from Windows 10 to 11. It's going to cost me some money, but I think that this is important because we have so many Windows 10 devices in my home, for example.
So are you saying Windows XP is no longer a good thing to have?
Neat. Do you know what's shocking is how much out there is even older than that? Like 86 vintage and stuff like that. It's usually stuff in the medical field or in operational technology stuff, because you don't want to monkey with it once it's in there. So it's remarkable how much of the world, banking, other stuff, runs on really old stuff that they have put a moat around rather than touch it.
I've been told one of the easiest breakthroughs that isn't happening is the owner manager buying a separate computer for his business. He's actually playing Tetris on his company machine because that's his laptop or her laptop. Usually it's his because they make the stupid mistakes. Is that the easiest way to protect yourself?
Separating your home computing and your work computing is a nice thing. I do that myself. It just gives a little separate footprint to the two. One from privacy as well, because if I'm mixing my work stuff onto my home stuff, my home environment is not as robust. That's exactly what the bad guys are looking for. And it also gives you that smaller attack surface to look at for the work stuff and to manage it. So if you've got staff who travel with devices or take it home a lot, looking at the impact, either buy them home security stuff or give them a second device, make it an employee perk or something to do. Technology is so cheap nowadays, that kind of separation is easily affordable. Or giving them licenses to have a more secure home environment or personal environment.
So ransomware seems to be another issue. You see that happening with hospitals. All of a sudden, an attack takes place. It's one, would you not have your information secured elsewhere? And does it matter depending on how you do your backups? Because I know there's different ways of doing backups, full backup, and then one that's scheduled for any changed files and so forth. Does that offer a bit of protection, having your backups, and if they're not connected to online connectivity words?
Yeah, smart backup is a great defense against ransomware. It has reduced effectiveness slightly. Don't do backups, but just recognize now it's harder to do really good backups because you don't want to have, backing up encrypted stuff. The bad guys have gotten a little smarter. What they do now is they will live in your environment a little longer before they notify you. So that time that they're, in your environment, the longer that is, the worse it is for you. Unfortunately, almost all attacks now with ransomware, they will not do an immediate ransomware attack. They will move laterally, establish a footprint, maybe use you as a beacon to do other attacks elsewhere outside. When they're tired of that, they will ransomware you after you've been compromised for a very long period. Additionally, especially for small and mid-sized businesses, rooting those out, those other places that they're attacked, have been difficult. If you're a big organization with lots of staff and money, you're going to hire great help and track all this stuff down. But for any business, if you get ransomware, take that extra step and think that, are they elsewhere and just laying low? That's the worst thing. When you go through such a terrible event that's so disruptive to your business, recover from it and then have it happen again because you missed someplace where on another platform they were lying low, expecting you to come back after cleanup. That's very common. And once you're on that kind of victim list, other bad guy groups will go looking and saying, oh yes, they didn't patch the hole that the other group came in. We're going to come back in and ransomware them too.
Is there a way to forensically go, listen, you're clean, you're not clean, you're at risk, whether they park something on your device or your platform, hopefully it's not your water softener. In which case, how do you find that one? The level of sophistication can make it more interesting if you're using a certain type of device. That attack was used in the past, country to country. You had to have 2 or 3 things happen at the same time. And it goes, okay, I'm alive and I'm going to wreck your centrifuge. Versus, someone don't have a centrifuge here, but if they insert something, is there a way to detect and go, hey, listen, burning? So is there some way to look under the hood and go, yep, you got a chipmunk in your motor, you want to get that out, put a nest in there?
And by the way, you've got chipmunks in your trunk too. The metrics, the real math around this is that time to detection is important. The sooner, the better you can detect things. So how do you do that? There's pretty good security that comes with a lot of the platforms we have today, but the step up is when you pay extra and get more of an advanced platform. So a lot of those can help you detect, number one, an attack sooner or attempts to attack you. And the other thing is, where else has this gone? And the really good stuff of security software will do that. So like I got this attachment, I opened it, whoops, it was malware. Who else got this? Where else did it go? Or where else were there connections that, looks like this, they entered and they compromised the router. That's one kind of approach. The second is also then doing a look and saying, what isn't patched up to date? What doesn't have all the updates it should have in my environment? And if you're looking for it and you're finding them, the bad guys probably looked for it and they found them. So updating those, patching those things. It turns out that most attacks today are not super James Bondy stuff. They're just finding stuff that hasn't been patched in a long time. Some stuff, 5 years or more. There was an attack today in the news with this group of people called 4chan. They hadn't updated their web software PHP since, I think it was 2016, the PHP component. That's what the baddies look for.
What are ways of telling your staff that these things you'll never do, don't send $1 million to my other account? What's a good way to train the staff with some thumbnails?
Yeah, in big business, there's some really advanced stuff going on, which is interesting, which is not appropriate, I think, for small, mid-sized businesses. But I think just having that conversation and saying, hey, look, staff, I'm never going to call you on the weekend and tell you to pay an invoice. We're going to do that during business hours. I'm not going to ask you to bail me out with gift cards out of jail. So just number one, always think twice when you get unusual emails, even if you think they're from me, and never hesitate to call me or any other manager or any coworker just to confirm something you've gotten an email, because phishing is part of every successful cyber attack. So let's just think about that when we do that. Number one is conversation. There's anti-phishing training you can get. There's some free stuff. I'm a mixed opinion about the value of it because I think it's overdone and it never scaled to the most important people. So enter some the big businesses do is they'll say CEO and VPs who have financial signing authority, if they're failing the phishing training, we're going to get really excited, but a field repairman, we're going to get less excited because the risk is low. For most businesses, just having that conversation and then just updating your stuff. Find your stuff, update it as much as possible. So for example, that attack from today I talked about, if they had updated any time in the last 5 years, they wouldn't have been vulnerable to this attack. Even if they had just updated that 9-year-old component, they wouldn't have been vulnerable today. So that's the kind of thinking. Find your stuff, update it, and talk to your people about it. Instead of, if you don't want to do anti-phishing, just bring it up at a meeting saying, hey, I'm not going to belabor this, but hey, look, beware of this stuff. If something's too good to be true, it probably is. Don't compromise your work stuff with that nonsense. Nobody's trying to give you $1 million from an uncle you've never heard of.
Nigerian Prince moments, page 2. So does AI, is that the friend or foe in this picture? Because I can see AI being leveraged because it can sort through a lot more quicker. Do businesses or do the companies that provide that security around the business leverage AI to the benefit, and do the hackers leverage AI to the benefit of them?
I like the way you phrase that you parse that really nicely. So one is that AI itself is an opportunity and a risk. I am extremely cautious about what I put into AI. I'm really careful about business stuff that I put into those because they're learning on your data. And these companies change hands too. So you have to be careful. Don't put anything in there you wouldn't put in another public source or public data, and educate your staff to that, particularly for BYO AI that people use to bring into work. That is a concern, but it's not the biggest one. I think the benefit side, when we look at the defender attacker side, this is where it gets interesting. And I am all in on the defender side of the pendulum, winning on this one. Attackers don't need to use AI right now. AI is expensive, except for when they're helping produce more cogent phishing emails, ones that have no spelling mistakes, translate easily. We'll pull in some LinkedIn data to say, hey, I saw you at this conference last week in Baltimore. Great to see you, Greg. We had a great conversation. Want to continue that, that kind of customization or more spear phishing of the phishing emails. That's about the most impact. They don't need to use super high-tech stuff because business is so good today. With stuff not patched, then they're rolling in money now. So why spend money to just make the same amount of money? That's a very honest assessment of what's going on in the world. That could change in maybe 5 to 10 years, but today the bad guys don't need to spend that money to do it. On the other side, on the defender side, this is where I am excited, happy. In fact, this is probably the most important thing that's happened in the last 5 to 10 years in security, is using AI on the defense side. One is helping us make more people effectively. So we can have junior staff in security who behave like seniors because this helps them and prompts them, and it frees up our senior and most valuable security analysts from mundane number crunching stuff and finding out who got that email. They can just get an answer and ask who got the infected email, and they get a list instead of having to alt tab and do it. They save time, and the junior staff who don't know how to do that are now assisted in how to do that and are given the information. That's exciting. Second, looking through the haystack to find the needles, find it sooner, react to it quicker, maybe even some automatic detection, automatic remediation, if that's what you're comfortable with. That is real today and it's being used, and it's really making a difference.
I've been told that as scary and business-changing a cyber attack is, actually the conversation with your client where you have to tell them, oh, by the way, your information is being hacked. And that is killing as many or more businesses than the original hack. Give me some feedback on that.
No, 100%. Supply chain is real. The supply chain with your partners is real. And that's also a conversation, not only with your staff, but with your partners to have, is saying, hey, look, we exchange a lot of information all day. We're great partners. I don't know what your security posture is. I can tell you what mine is. So let's have that conversation and make sure that we're kind of level on that. Part of that conversation may end up costing you money because you may start to put up some more defenses against your partners. But having that conversation is good, because it's bad to go to a partner and say, wow, you malwared us unintentionally. We're having a bad day. It's worse when you have to go to them hat in hand and say, we gave you a present. We're sorry. what we told you as soon as we found out, but even still, that's a bad day. Early detection is important. Tell all your partners.
I remember having a conversation with somebody and they were worried about QR codes and that they were picking up a fake QR code. I said, treat it like food. If it's on the ground, you don't pick up the food, right? If you don't know what the context of the QR code and why you're scanning it, be mindful, or it looks like it's been stickered onto a vinyl surface.
The human engineering of this, I had a discussion yesterday with a colleague who told me about a phishing test they did. They left USB devices around, and the pickup rate for people who put them in the corporate devices was pretty low. It was 10%, but still, enough to get picked up, but it was low. But when they matched it with a AI generated messages, one of the few cases, this was overkill, but it was just to show the impact of the human engineering side. They had a voice generation of the CEO. They had parsed together from numerous recordings he'd done publicly and said, hey, it's been a great year. Here's in all of your waste baskets, you're going to find a USB token. And they told a story about why it was there. This information is our bonus plan for the next year. The hit rate was exceptionally high, in excess of 50%, according to the story. The human engineering part of the attacks, whether it be an in-person lie or other ones, just had some AI sprinkled on it for the sake of the news. The human side is always going to be there. And I like to use the word ingredients. We're starting to get into the stage now where all of our software needs to have a list of ingredients in it. Because when we talk about attack surface, we don't know what's in that piece of software that we purchased. So there's a thing called a software bill of materials, which needs to catch on. And it tells us about all the ingredients that you have on a cereal box, saying, here are the components in that. PHP from 2016, we talked about. If you're buying a component that may have vulnerabilities like that router or other software, you as the consumer need to know to protect yourselves. The supply chain thing is getting more important and relevant now because that's what the bad guys are focusing on. They're going upstream and saying, hey, I'm not going to hit you. I'm going to hit the 1,000 customers who use that software. That's a much better payday for me. Even to the point now where the bad guys are putting staff as developers into large companies in order to compromise. And that's not a James Bond story. That's real today. North Korea is even doing it remotely via Zoom interviews. So staff they think is in California, they're going to proxy it, say, hey, I applied on LinkedIn. I live in California. I'm going to be a remote employee, your software company. I have all these skills, and they have the skills, but they're not your employee. They're from the Republic of North Korea.
It's interesting. It's almost like there's a secondary business to validate who you're dealing with. I like the idea of knowing what's in the cereal box. What are the ingredients? And I suspect in the past, that's usually been the proprietary piece no one wanted to share. But the proverbial backdoor, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's what's in there, and that's the toxic component. Nowadays, we can find out really easily what's in there by beating up this stuff a bit. It's not the black box that it used to be. So why not disclose it? Our experts can find out what's in there. So why not just cough it up and protect your customers?
So if you're a large organization, would your procurement group then be tasked with, if they're buying software or a piece of hardware that has software, to have that as another element, not made through child labor, wasn't purchased from a country that we are not allowed to do business with, the usual checklist? Is that going to be a checklist that you would recommend companies to have in their procurement? And if you're a small business, then is there someone out there that could do that for you, that procurement piece?
Very few companies and governments ask for that now, which is unfortunate. They're mostly in pharmaceutical and banking. You'll see it, and some parts of governments, such as the guys who work in the secret squirrel area, will do that. Unfortunately, that's very limited. As a small business, you can do it when you're looking at buying stuff. If they're disclosing, number one, you're going to check, are they doing patches frequently? Are they disclosing vulnerabilities? And do they have a reputation of coughing up quickly when they've had a vulnerability to discover themselves? Or do they drag their feet? The foot draggers are easy to spot. They're notorious. That should be part of their decision-making. Much like if I'm not going to buy a car, if it's exploding and they're dragging their feet on acknowledging that. But if there's a recall, i.e. a patch I have to put on my software, I want to know about that quickly. That's an easy thing to find out. So that's step one. And if you want to go that extra step, if you are in a critical area, you press the vendor yourself. Hey, I want that software bill of materials so I know that I'm protected. And even just asking as a customer, that can change a vendor's behavior. So you can ask them, and they'll probably tell you under long as you don't tell anybody else. But they may prompt them to do the right thing and start advertising what their ingredients are to protect their customers. So one customer interaction like that can change a whole company.
Are insurance companies making people kick boxes to get insurance?
Cyber insurance is a fascinating area right now. And there's a ton of money going back and forth in that because companies who have ransomware insurance, you get big payouts. Insurance companies are wrestling with this because they are not in the tech business. Today, all they're looking for is a checklist of things that you're doing. Do you have, a program to put security software on all your endpoints? Do you secure some of the important stuff in your business, like DNS, your name servers, the critical stuff? Do you have any protection around it? That's the limit they're going. In the future, and this is an area that's of real interest to us, is all the stuff that we know about what's going on inside your business and assigning risk scores to that through technology. That is a great modern way to do that. So like a real kind of deep assessment. Here's a score. Here was last week's score. Here's next week's score. That should give you a fair insurance rate, more than just, you don't do good things, you get this rate, or if you do some security things, you get a 15% off. And that's frankly the limit of the maturity of that industry today. So if you do good things, you're going to get a lower insurance rate.
What's a zero-day account attack?
A zero-day attack is one that the bad guys know about that nobody else knows about. It's called that because there hasn't been a notification yet. And those are incredibly valuable. Let's say it's an Apple zero-day. I could sell that to the good guys for probably $250,000 because that is something that the companies want to stop. These are called bug bounties. They're going to pay that out. And there's a whole fleet of people who make your business doing that, finding vulnerabilities, reporting them, getting paid back by the bug bounty programs to report those. But when the bad guys have them, that's a bad day, right? So we don't want the bad guys to have them because that means they're exploiting stuff with nobody knowing about it until it gets detected. And unless it's found in a bug bounty, we only find out about it when the bad guys are using it enough that it gets detected somehow. And that's why a lot of the business used to be about finding things that have been reported like viruses. Now it's more behavior stuff, but we're seeing bad, unusual things happen. That's just as important as finding stuff that, probably maybe more important than finding stuff that we've seen before. So bad guys don't like to use 0 days because you kind of burn them and lose them, but they save them for important stuff. So typically country on country, or if it gets discovered by a ransomware group, they're going to go to town, use it widely, or try to use it in a supply chain attack. So I'm going to go after a software company with the 0 day and I'm going to mess with their software. I get many more customers suddenly with that. And then I might just go after some banks or something with the 0 day as well.
I recall, was it Maersk, the shipping line? They got totally wiped everything globally. The only reason they were able to have a saving grace, there was a computer that didn't have power on that day at that time. And it was the only computer that held, and they shared the information throughout the space. That was the only PC that wasn't up and running at the time the attack was unfolding, and they were able to recall their data. And then speaking of transportation and new cars, even drones, those are the next layer. And you hear about people hacking cars. Can I stop your car, et cetera? It sounds a little more sophisticated. A little less sophisticated is let me steal your car and have a sniffer pick up your RF signal off your key fob, right? How do you start stopping that? The car is listening to you like some TVs. How do you put that protection in that type of space?
You can't add software to your car typically to help protect it. So what do? The company I work for, Trend, it's not probably widely known fact in the world that it's about a $2 billion company, but we discover more vulnerabilities than any other company, Microsoft, Google. We discover more than anybody else in the world. And we have a focus too on vehicles. So we have an annual event where we have these threat researchers come in. Quite often we will have a Tesla provided by Tesla. It happens to be one of the first kind of more intelligent cars to come out, but there's other models will probably be used in the future. That's part of the pwn to own competition we're trying to hack. So vehicles are a target, but the good news is automakers know that, and the attack surface on those is pretty narrow. So there's the in-car entertainment, and then there's some modules such as the car computer itself. that can be targets. The smarts are well known and documented. We bang on those continuously to acknowledge that, but the automakers, fortunately, are generally being good. At least the North American automakers and the European ones are taking that responsibly, such as to the level of tamper-proofing some of the components. If you run shop and you're doing maintenance on a car and you're going to tamper with one to get contacts, bank info, even the tamper-proofing is an important thing. So providing, you'll get the car owner will be notified if there's been tampering of components, or the automaker will. So that's the kind of good steps that are there. Unfortunately, they're getting a lot of attention, even though they're not a big target. That's one of the nice areas where I think there's mostly responsible vendors. Cars coming from some of the emerging economies, I'm skeptical about. In fact, I would not trust them to this day because I don't see them at these events, and I don't see their staff. I don't know that they have staff even concerned about this. So that's a concern. But for most vehicles we have on the road here, I'm less concerned than I am about other stuff out there.
I can speak to not so much being hacked, but having the lights. I'm going down the main highway through Ottawa, and all of a sudden my display lights come on saying, you have an issue. And, go to the dealership going, guys, car's running. I can still stop. I can still steer, and lights are working. They ran a check, and I said, okay, if it happens again. And it did. So I show up again, left the car running, and they came in, they plugged in their kit through the feed underneath the dash, and they had to do an update on the patch.
This is an interesting area. Now that we're getting these national dividing lines recently between where the, economies used to be interconnected, now that, there's even more emphasis on nation states going after nation states, it's an interesting time to look at things like software in automobiles, especially since automakers are normally national, associated with a country. So that may change some of my rosy picture of where the automobile sector is. But that's an interesting one because it mixes new tech, old tech. So like we talked about gas pipelines or refineries, it's really similar with automotive because this is not historically where they've come from. They're not software companies, but now they are.
This is really interesting stuff. If a viewer goes, I need to know more, how do we get a hold of you, and what areas do you mostly work in?
I work in a couple of areas. Most of my time is on outreach to customers, telling them the good and the bad news or what to do. That's a big part of my job. The corporate development part is staying up in the markets about what's going on in security and the strategy side. I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best place to reach Greg Young at Trend Micro. I'm on Twitter at Orange Klaxon. That's Klaxon, like a klaxon on a ship. That's probably the best ways to get or see what I'm blathering on about lately.
I say thank you to Greg Young, my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. Appreciate your time today. If you found this entertaining, enlightening, maybe a bit shocking, and you want to know more, reach out to Greg. Or if you're a large organization wondering, like, do I have all my bases covered? Again, reach out to Greg. That's what he's in the business for.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, waynemotive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8, and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motive 8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer, please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.